Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to News from the Torah. Today is the 2nd of May, the 20th day of the month of Iyar. And this week we will be reading two Torah portions of Behar Bechukotai and ending the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. Hi, I'm Leah Aharoni, and this is News from the Torah. Thank you for joining us today for this amazing episode where we will discuss two Torah portions, as we said, Behar and Bechukotai, and their relationship to current events. And there are three stories I would like to tell you today. One story is very unfortunate of a missionary family clandestinely embedding itself in the Jewish community. I actually know this story personally because I was close with one of the family members. I will talk about that later. The second story is the story of Jubilee and social justice in Jewish law. Social justice is such a big term these days, and we will explore how Torah sees social justice. And the third one is the story of money. This Torah portion discusses the issue of money a lot and how we should be handling money and how we should be handling properties. And we will discuss how the Torah sees money in light of this Torah portion. But before all that, this week marks the 54th anniversary of the beginning of the Six-Day War in 1967. During the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel captured back parts of the Jewish homeland, Judea and Samaria, and the Golan Heights. And it is so symbolic that this event comes out during the Parsha, the weekly portion of Behar, which talks all about the redemption of our estate, the redemption of our property. In the Jubilee year, every person goes back to the family estate, the family portion in the land. It is our birthright, and it is amazing that the Jewish people reclaimed their birthright in the heartland of the land of Israel, specifically during the reading of this portion. Stay tuned. We will be right back after these messages.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
So the Jewish communities all over have been shocked with the recent story of a missionary family embedding itself in the heart of the Orthodox community in Jerusalem. For the past 15 years, this family has been masquerading as Jewish, and not only that, as fervently observant, with the husband learning in a famous Kabbalistic yeshiva and serving as a rabbi, as a mohel, performing circumcisions, as a Jewish scribe, writing and selling mezuzot and tefillin, Jewish ceremonial objects, marrying people, giving Jewish halachic legal advice, and even masquerading as a Kohen, a member of the priestly family, and thus having certain rights. And the wife was very knowledgeable in Jewish law, and in numerous Facebook discussions she had excellent advice to give. The family had 5 children in Orthodox Jewish school system in Jerusalem, and throughout all this time, not only were they not who they pretended to be, but they were actually not even Jewish. Yes, this family that pretended to be Jewish was not Jewish. They were actually Christian missionaries trying to infiltrate the community, create trust, so that after a certain passage of time they could proselytize and evangelize Jews. The story came out first in 2014 when it was known that this family was missionarizing, and at the time they said that they have repented, that have made a mistake, and the husband was asked to leave his yeshiva. They moved to a different neighborhood and picked up right from where they started. So this story came out again just recently after the wife passed away from cancer, and one of the children talked about Jesus to a classmate of hers. This is how it became known. But over the past 5 years, as the wife of this family struggled with cancer, the Jewish community in Jerusalem galvanized to help her and to help the family and supported them. I met the wife first a few years ago in a Facebook discussion, and then we were circling in some of the same circles until we finally met in person. So I've known her for about 4 or 5 years and met her quite a few times, had quite a few discussions with her. And just like me, many of the women in Jerusalem felt that this was a very close personal friend. She was cherished, she was loved, she was supported. People went out of their way to help the family financially as they were struggling through her disease, to help them take care of the children. And it all turned out to be an act. Not the cancer, obviously, but everything else. And despite the sweet and outgoing personality of this woman, despite her courageous fight with cancer and her resilience, despite the fact that she has won the respect of the community and the heart of the community, today this story is creating a huge amount of anger and mistrust. After being brokenhearted over her death 2 months ago, today people feel taken advantage of, lied to, and misled. Where does all this betrayal, anger, and sadness leave us? Will we now be more guarded in whom we trust, or will we maintain our relationships with people and accept the vulnerability? Knowing her personally and having heard of the backstory of the missionary activity a few weeks ago, I was surprised, but I was not shocked. The same exact story happened in my own community 15 years ago. A popular English-speaking family of converts turned out to be once again underground missionaries. In that case, they converted in order to come to Israel and to proselytize, but since they continued practicing their religion undercover and the intent of the conversion was dishonest, the entire conversion was invalid. When confronted, that family showed no remorse and simply refused to talk about it. People who had eaten at their house the food that was obviously not kosher, people who helped them with a special needs child, people who supported them in getting used to the new community and the new society, felt once again betrayed, sad, and angry. And then that couple moved out of the community, went to a different place where they now live in the open, and our community was left to pick up the pieces and then rebuild, and then to continue to do what we do best, make people feel welcome, helping each other out. Then, about 10 years ago, another secret Messianic couple was discovered in the Denver Jewish community. That episode left ripple effects throughout the Jewish communities in the United States as people kept looking out and asking questions about each other. And then again, 2 years ago, in the Israeli town of Ashkelon, an older retired couple turned out to be fugitives, criminals, running away from the FBI. And as much as I hate to say this, I think we need to accept that being an immigrant society, like the American or the English-speaking society in Israel, with people coming in from various diverse communities, and especially with many of our ties forged on social media, we need to accept the fact that we do not always know the real life of anyone we meet. This is so true in our community, since respecting people's privacy and staying away from gossip are central values for many of us. The laws of guarding our speech, the so-called laws of Lashon Hara, require us to refrain from mentioning people's misdeeds and discussing people's past, unless there is a constructive purpose of preventing harm. And my biggest takeaway, and something I see continuously in my work with many of my coaching clients, is that we don't know anything that is going on in anyone's life. No matter what people post on Facebook, no matter what they share over a cup of coffee, what you see is not what you get. It takes a huge amount of trust and deep listening and perception skills to really understand what is going on in people's everyday life. And even that, sometimes we just don't get it right. This is such a wake-up call to look beyond the veneer and recognize that people are complicated, that we all have baggage we carry, and we all try the best we can while putting our best foot forward. None of this obviously absolves this missionary family from the betrayal of trust and the manipulation they tried to pull off. And I'm not proposing for a minute that we stop trusting each other or caring for each other, but we need to keep trusting and caring for each other while letting go of the feeling of control that we know who the other people in our lives are, because we really don't. And if one year of COVID has taught us anything, is that we're all deeply, deeply masked. But even in this masked state, even when we don't really know who we are or who the other people around us are, because we really don't, and accepting the fact that we do not know the backstory of other people, we still need to continue helping each other. And this is a central point in this week's Torah portion. You cannot let your brother fall. You cannot let your brother falter. If you don't help somebody out with a loan when they're in a good place, they will be forced to sell their house, to sell their property in order to keep themselves up. And if they sell their property, they might come to a place where they actually need to sell themselves into slavery to be able to support their family. And sometimes even that is not enough, and they need to go out to foreign places, to foreign countries, to be able to make a living. If we don't support each other when we're in a good place, we force each other to go further and further and further into poverty, where it becomes much, much, much more difficult to pull somebody out of it. And this is a major piece of Jewish social justice. Yes, everybody has a right to their personal money and personal property. That's a big part of the Jewish outlook, and we will discuss it in the third segment today. But we can not only look out for ourselves, we have to look out for each other. And as the Torah says, when your brother falls, pick him up. We have to treat each other with the same degree of brotherly and sisterly love. And this is exactly what the Jewish community of Jerusalem has extended to this missionary couple before they were found out. A family with no ties, a family that is actually a Christian family that nobody knows back from their old country, came and settled in Jerusalem. And their neighbors treated them as brothers. Their neighbors treated them as family. People raised tens of thousands of dollars for this woman's medical care. People sent them meals. People paid for their children's schooling and buses. People provided childcare. People went to the oncology units so that she would not have to go through chemotherapy alone. People have done the most for this family, treating them literally like family, like other people treat their closest brothers and sisters. And I think it is especially this propensity to be so close, to become so close, to help each other in such an outstanding way that really doesn't happen in many places, is what makes the Jewish community more vulnerable to infiltration by missionaries like these. But I think we absolutely cannot allow them to change us. This would be a huge victory for missionaries. We need to stay the way we are and to continue supporting each other, loving each other, treating each other like family, giving each other a helping hand. And sometimes, yes, sometimes we will be swindled, but that's just par for the course. I would rather us be right 99 times in helping each other and make one wrong turn, then clamp inside our shell and create a society of disconnection. Yes, we all have backstories, we all have previous lives, we all have things in our past that we might not necessarily be proud of, but that doesn't mean that we're not worthy of being who we are today and helping each other in the places that we're at. We might be masking our past, but that does not mean we need to be masking our present or our future. Stay right here. We'll be right back after these messages.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back. So, as we said previously in the introduction, this week's Torah portion, Behar, really places a lot of emphasis on the Jewish social justice system. Judaism does not believe in socialism. Judaism believes in people having personal capital, personal wealth, and personal property, something they pass on in the family from one generation to another, and obviously something people create more of with their hard work. So in that sense, Judaism definitely believes in private property and making the most out of what you can. But on the flip side, Judaism does not believe in hard-nosed capitalism. We, in the Torah, see a very clear social welfare net structure in which everybody has a responsibility to help each other out. And this is how Jewish social justice is different from American social justice. American social justice is all about rights. It's about human rights and civil rights and economic rights and every person having a right to something. And obviously when people have rights and their rights clash, they fight over their rights, take them to court, become a litigious society, and create a lot of strife. Jewish social justice works differently. Jewish social justice does not mention any rights, but it mentions a lot of responsibilities. And a central responsibility that is mentioned in this week's Torah portion over and over and over and over again is when your brother falls, you have to help him out. So if your brother falls and is forced to sell his property, you have to buy it back for him. And if your brother falls and he doesn't have any property to sell, so he has to sell his labor, you have to treat him properly. You have to treat him with compassion, and you have to treat him with dignity. And if your brother falls even further and he is forced to sell himself to a non-Jewish owner, you have to buy him back because non-Jewish slave owners obviously did not treat their property with dignity. And we know this from history. And so on and on. The idea of Jewish social justice is that every person has a responsibility to come forward and help the other. And instead of it becoming taking away from the rich to give to the poor, the way we see it, let's say, in American terms or in socialism in Russia and so on, it becomes about every person taking of their own things to give to the other. And when you place the responsibility on the people, what happens is that they stop trying to hide their money and they accept responsibility as part of the social framework, and they come forward to help each other. And this is how we create a Jewish society that is so focused on social justice and on helping the other, on helping the underdog. Unfortunately, social justice has become this catchphrase for all kinds of progressive values and progressive political ideas. And I don't mean it in this way. I mean it in a true sense of social justice, building a society that is just, where every person is valued, and where when people fall, somebody comes along and helps them. And this is not something you can build by force or by legislation. It is only something that you can cultivate through education and social expectation. So how does this work in Judaism? The first idea in this week's Torah portion is the idea of the sabbatical year. Believe it or not, the sabbatical year was not born in the academia. It comes right out of the Bible. And the idea of the sabbatical year is that after 7 years of working the land, you have to take 1 year break, give a break to the land, and just live off your savings, so to speak. God promises to make the 6-year crop very abundant, so there will be enough for the 7th year. And by abstaining from work for 1 year and leaving the land to rest, first of all, we do not deplete the land. And secondly, we proclaim that the land is not ours. It is God's, and God has given it to us. And this is an extremely crucial and important point in understanding the Jewish outlook on property. Property is not ours. Property is God's. Even if we worked very hard for this property, even if we worked very hard to make this money, it is not my money, it is not the money I made, it is the money that God gave me. And if you really look at modern research, you will find out that this whole idea of this self-made man is not true. Nobody ever makes themselves. People are born into an environment, people grow up in an environment where they pick up certain opportunities. There's always somebody who has helped you climb the ladder and get ahead. And understanding this and being gracious and grateful for these opportunities, being grateful for the ability to get ahead, and recognizing God's blessing in everything we have is a big part of the sabbatical year. The other thing that happens during the sabbatical year is that the crops that grow on their own accord can be picked up by anybody. So people who are poor have this opportunity to eat and take food for themselves from the fields, from the orchards, from the farms, just like everybody else, because during the 7th year, there is no ownership. Everything belongs to everybody. So yes, once in 7 years, you can have communism. Once in 7 years, whatever the earth grows, everybody's entitled to. But it's not a constant. It's this exception. It's a once in 7 years, there is this perfect state where the nature gives whatever it gives, God gives whatever it gives, and we all partake of it equally after 6 years of individual work. So what Judaism presents is a balance between what we see as competing social outlooks, capitalism and socialism or communism. Judaism says for 6 years, you need to work hard, you need to invest your effort, but for 1 year, you need to understand that in the end, it is not only yours. God has given you a lot, and God has given other people less. So once in 7 years, you just leave it fallow, and everybody comes and takes. You can come and take, and other people can come and take. And this is the idea of the sabbatical year. And actually, this coming year, the year that will start in September, after Rosh Hashanah, will be a 7th year in Israel. And observing the sabbatical year in a modern society that is not agricultural, that is money-based, where we buy produce in the stores, and where this produce cannot be sold because it doesn't belong to the farmer, is quite a challenge. After the sabbatical come the laws of the Jubilee year. The Jubilee year is every 50th year, and what happens during the 50th year is that every estate goes back to its original owner. When the Jewish people conquered the land of Israel after the exodus from Egypt, under the leadership of Joshua, the entire land of Israel was divided between the 12 tribes. And each tribe then subdivided its portion between the different families. In the end, every family got an estate, and every person in the family got a certain estate. Now, a person is not allowed to sell that estate unless they have nothing to eat and no way to support each other. But this sale is not permanent. This sale is only until the Jubilee year. So in reality, it's really not a sale. It's a long-term lease. And the lease would work based on the number of years left until the Jubilee. These are the laws set out in this week's portion. And the Torah tells us that if a person is forced to sell his estate to feed his family, his relatives must support him and come out and help him buy this portion back. You cannot stand idly by and see your brother, your cousin, your nephew, or your close friend sell his apartment because he doesn't have what to live, sell his land because he doesn't have what to live on. You have to come out and give him a loan or help him buy the property back. And this is part of this social safety net. We need to treat each other like brothers. We just discussed this in the previous segment. And really, really look out for each other. We cannot let each other falter. And the next part is if, like we said, if a person sold the property and they still have nothing to live on, they can go out and sell themselves into slavery, their labor into what's called slavery. But once again, all the slaves are freed during the 50th year. So it's a long-term labor sale, not exact slavery. And there too, the owner is required to treat the slave, the servant, with dignity, and he's not allowed to work him too hard or to undermine him or to emotionally abuse him in any kind of way. And there is a mitzvah, once again, to buy him out. And certainly if the person is forced to sell himself into non-Jewish slavery, where he would be treated unequally, there is a commandment on the entire Jewish community to buy them out and provide whatever is needed for the person to be able to get up. And it's really interesting. There's a law in Judaism that you are responsible for your closest relatives first. So, for example, if your first degree relative is poor and there's another person who is not related to you who is poor, you have to support your family members first. And you would expect that this would create more of an egotistical kind of society that is only looking out for its own and does not help people. And you would expect that this would give people the reason to help their relatives and not help others. And actually, the opposite is true, because helping people works in concentric circles. It's easy to give to the people who are close to you, but once you get used to giving to the people who are close to you, you start giving to people who are a little bit further away, and so on and so on. And this is how you create a society of giving, a society of chesed, a society where every person looks out for each other like his brother. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
Welcome back for our third and final segment. So for a religion that deals mainly with spirituality and connection with God, Judaism seems to spend a whole lot of time on property. And especially this entire Torah portion of Behar is dedicated to property laws. And then the next Torah portion of Bechukotai, which we're also reading today, is divided into two. Half of it deals with all the curses that would befall the Jewish people if they do not listen to God. But then at the end of that portion, obviously, we come back and repent. And the second part of the Torah portion deals with the value we place on the labor of different people. So these two Torah portions spend a whole lot of time talking about money. Now, I know that many people think that money is not a very spiritual thing. They think that actually money and values and money and spirituality do not go together. And sometimes when somebody offers a service that is in any way related to religion, people say, how can you take money for that? This thing should be free. Religion should be free. People should not be taking money for religion. And actually, nothing could be further from truth. And this is absolutely opposite of what the Torah believes. So last week, I told you about a great Talmudic scholar, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And actually, yesterday was his day of passing. And it was a big, huge holiday in Israel with close to 500,000 people showing up to his grave in the town of Meron to celebrate his passing. Yes, why do Jews celebrate the passing of rabbis? Because we believe that on the day that a rabbi passes, he actually receives an influx of Torah and he comes up and to God, and he's now in his true ultimate connection. So while we mourn and cry the passing of rabbis when they actually pass away, after a while we start celebrating those dates and marking them as dates when these rabbis reach their true greatness. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was persecuted by the Romans. The Romans actually wanted to kill him. He spent 13 years hiding in a cave in the town of Pki'in together with his son. There was a miracle, and a carob tree grew by this cave, and there was a wellspring. So for 13 years, all he did was eat carobs and drink water and learn the Torah together with his son. And it is considered that during this time, he formulated the ideas that he later wrote down in the book of the Zohar, and they formed the Kabbalistic tradition of Judaism. Obviously, he did not invent the Kabbalah, he just formulated it in order to be written down. The Kabbalah itself has been passed down from God to Moses throughout the generations. But what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, this person who spent 13 years eating carobs and drinking water, being completely separate from the material world, to the extent that when he came out of the cave, he could not bear watching people doing regular activities like plowing their fields and not being involved in something spiritual. It is this Rabbi Shimon who writes in the book of Zohar that free is the root of all evil. That's right, I'm going to say that again. Free is the root of all evil. And you have to pay for religious objects. You have to pay for any commandments or any mitzvah that you perform. And this is actually a law. You're not allowed to enjoy any kind of religious object or perform any kind of commandment for free. You have to pay money, and good money, for it. And why is that so? Why does Judaism place spirituality and money together? So Rabbi Tzadok of Lublin, a Hasidic rabbi for about 150 years ago, writes that every person has a certain spirit in him, a certain spirit that belongs to his soul. And every material possession that a person has is permeated by that spirituality. You have a certain spirituality that comes down with you, a certain soul, and God gives you a part of the world to serve you, and that part of the world that is supposed to serve you is imbued with your spirituality. So that's part one. But part two is the following. We all come into the world with a set of problems. God gives us problems to solve. And to solve those problems, He also gives us physical resources. So if we don't use our physical resources to solve problems, we're not really committed. You know, in English we have this saying, put your money where the mouth is, or talk is cheap. We can all talk about wanting to change. We can all talk about wanting to reach certain goals. We can all talk about our priorities in life. But unless we actually invest in them, invest resources, invest money, we're not really serious and we're not going to get anywhere without making that investment. So what does free do? When we think something is free, when we think we can reach something without investing money in it, we don't really commit to it, and we don't really value or cherish it, and we don't really spend the time and the effort necessary to get that done. And that's what happens? Nothing happens. So this idea of free, this mirage of free, actually pulled us away from the path of doing, of investing, of making an effort and getting things done. So this is one side of the story. And then think of yourself. Think of yourself. Would you want to work for free? Would you be as committed to getting a great job done if you're not getting paid? If you're a business owner, are you really committed to giving the best kind of service if you're not getting paid? Obviously not. When we don't get paid, we might be able to volunteer for a bit and give a little bit of our time and come when it works for us. But we're not as committed as when somebody pays us. And actually the opposite is true. When we don't get paid and we do not get paid what we think we're worth, we feel taken advantage of, we feel not honored, we feel unvalued, and over time we just stop doing it. We're not as serious about it, and we actually feel resentful, and we walk away and we don't do the work. Now, we all have a mission to do in this world. God gives us specific talents and abilities to do a mission in this world. So if we feel undervalued, uncommitted, unhappy doing this work, then we don't do it. And then the evil inclination gets exactly what it wants. On the one hand, the people who need the service, who need the help, they haven't invested, they're not committed, they're not putting their money where their mouth is. And on the other hand, the people who should be giving the service, who should be helping with solving the problem, are also not committed, and they feel undervalued because they're not getting money. The Hebrew word for money, kesef, is the same as the word for yearning. With your money, you show what you yearn for. With your money, you show what your priorities are. You put your money where your mouth is. Another word for money in Hebrew is damim, and it is the same as blood. Yes, blood money. Why blood money? Because just think of all the things you need to do to make that money. Wake up in the morning, eat your breakfast, go to work, spend 8, 9, 10, 12 hours working, drive back home, eat dinner, go to sleep, and all of that to do it all over again tomorrow. People spend so much time and energy either working or getting ready to work or resting from work that basically it takes over our life. So basically all of your life force, all of your blood is in that work that is then translated into money. So when you take a coin, you take that $1 bill, basically your whole life is in that $1 bill. And now where you put that dollar bill, this is exactly where your life is. If you put that $1 bill on your kid's education, you're saying, I'm dedicating my life and all these hours I needed to work to create this money to my child's education because this is my priority. And if you take that money and put it on a vacation to Alaska, you're saying, I'm putting all these hours of my life into this vacation to Alaska. And obviously, there's no judgment. Every person chooses what's important to them. But just understand, you are where your money is. And by spending money in a certain way, we basically show God and ourselves that these are our priorities. And this is why the Torah says that the Mitzvah of Charity, the commandment of giving charity, is such an important mitzvah because basically that charity is all of you. And when you give a certain amount of your money to charity, 10 or 20%, this is the Jewish law, between 10 and 20%, this is how much a person should be giving to charity. When you take that money and put it into charity, you're basically raising all of your money, all of your effort, all of your hard work, and making it holy. So with these concepts, Judaism has been able to create a society of people who are watching out for each other, who are helping each other, who are dedicated to charity in an unparalleled way. Because money and spirituality are not antithetical. Money and spirituality actually go together. God did not make a mistake when He created a world with money. God created a world where we could use our money to do amazing things, to support other people, to show our values, to invest in our children's education, to invest in our own education, to invest in our own spirituality. Just open your purse right now, look at those coins, look at those bills, and see each one of those coins and bills as an expression of your yearning, as an expression of what you want to have out of life, and then put that money into the places that will enable you to live the best life possible. Thank you so much for joining us on this show. I had so much fun joining you and talking with you about all these concepts. I really hope to see you again next week, same time, same place. News from the Torah. Bye-bye.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.